So, this, what I have in my hand here, took me about 1 month to make, from beginning to end. And the images that you see inside are built up over 3 separate layers. You can see one layer here has the yellow tones, and the other layer has some shadow, and the third layer has the grey tones which make up the images of the window and the fence around the courtyard. So to make this piece, obviously the first thing I needed was a good photograph. I had this location in mind, and I took probably 50 to 60 pictures of this same scene to get the exact right ambient lighting. Because the most important thing in a photograph is, apart from the composition, is obviously the lighting. So I chose my time very carefully. I went there at twilight, which in the winter time is between 3:30, 4:30 p.m. So I returned every day at twilight until I got this shot. Once I got this shot, I made duplicate copies, separated the image into 3 layers, and I have a technique using heat and a medium to apply the image to each sheet of glass. So I made 3 transparencies, 3 square transparencies on 5mm glass. And once I was happy with my transparencies, then I began to line them up to choose the correct order. And in this case, the grey tones are in the middle. There's some shadow at the back and the yellow is at the front. So I played around with the order until I actually got something that I liked. Once that's done, my transparencies are made. I then stack them up like cards and separate each layer if required with a clear layer. So in this case, I have one clear layer between the next layer to give some optical depth, which I really like. The whole idea of this concept is to create optical depth within the photograph, which for me is something exciting and new and slightly magical, bringing a picture to life that was normally just a 2-dimensional photograph. And this technique allows the light to enter and movement of shadow within the piece itself. So if you walk around from left to right, you can see some subtle change in the shadows within the picture. Once I'm happy with the order, here we've got, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 8 layers of glass here. I put these 8 layers into a silicone mold, which I make myself. Obviously custom make it to the size that I require. And I use a very high quality UV stable epoxy resin, which brings it all into one solid object. It melds the whole thing into one robust piece. So then it becomes a piece of sculpture. Once this is done, it takes about 1 week for this epoxy resin to set, 7 days. And after 6 or 7 days, I can then start to sculpt the shape and perfect the surfaces. So I first use a file to get the basic shape, and then I start to use different grades of sandpaper, starting from the very rough right up to the 500 grade, which is quite fine. Once I've done that part, then I can polish with a polishing wheel, using different polishing compounds to get this effect. And all in all, this takes up to 1 month from beginning to end. This one I particularly like because this is a courtyard in the inner city of Budapest. This is an example, a typical example of a courtyard that I'm sure Hungarians are very used to seeing, but in Scotland we don't have these architectural features, we don't have these courtyards. So for me it was very interesting to see this previously unknown architectural design in the middle of a lovely building in the centre of Budapest. This is actually in Egyetemter, where I lived, and I know this courtyard very, very well, but I also think it's one of the most beautiful that I've seen, and a very unusual thing for me. So that's what attracted me to this particular scene. As you can see, there are a couple of people in here. Now, I don't always photograph people, I usually photograph buildings, but sometimes I like to include a little bit of life in there to show the relationship between, well, us and the buildings. But normally, 75% of the time, I tend to just shoot scenes of buildings and places. In this case over here is a train station, and this one here is obviously a side of a building with the lights on at twilight. So normally I don't shoot people, but in this case I made an exception. Now sometimes, this is one example of a transparent piece. The ones on the wall here, I've used a silver base which creates light within the image. It was a technique that I've created myself to allow these pieces to be hung on a wall, because obviously you must have a fixture on the back for it to hang. So I couldn't hang this because the fixture would be visible. So the reason for the silver is that it creates its own mysterious glow within. It's not an exact reflection, it's more of an inner light that comes out, that enhances the transparencies that I've created here. These ones here, but the bigger ones, are 3 layers made in the same way, using obviously a larger mold than this one here. So it's the same principle, just a different application, in this case wall hanging. But these ones here are more sculptural, so they can freestand. They are completely weatherproof if you decide to put them outside. They're designed to be inside, but they're very robust, solid, well-made things, and they're quite heavy as well. This is about 5 kilos. These are about 5 or 6 kilos. There's a triptych over here which weighs about 20 altogether, 18 to 20 kilos. I very much like this technique because the results are permanent, and it will never decay. It will last longer than a photograph or a painting by a long way. They're almost immortal, which is what I really like about them. There's a lot of manual labor involved, a lot of sculpting, hours of sanding, so it's very hands-on work, which I really enjoy. If it were easy and it took one day, I don't think I would enjoy it so much, but this is the biggest challenge that I've come across so far, and I'm actually still learning to do it myself in many ways, but I think I'm quite good at it now. So that's the story so far. I find this scene very appealing because of 2 things: that the contrast between the brickwork here, the very rough brickwork, and grey concrete and stone, in contrast to these beautiful coloured windows. I think the contrast there is the beautiful, is the attraction for this. And also, what I've done is I have left the stone with the sanded surface, so it's very matte, and it actually represents the surface of concrete and stone. Matches it quite closely, and in sharp contrast to the glassy, reflective windows. So this was done to show the contrast between the two, and I've also created optical depth within each window so that you can actually see inside each window and look around almost into the room, around the corner into what's going on inside. So this creates a sense of intrigue. There's something for me, well, graphically beautiful about that, but also a sense of intrigue, and makes your imagination run slightly. So that's what's appealing for me. This was the last piece that I completed for the exhibition. I'd had a problem with another one that I wasn't satisfied with, so I decided to do something to please, something that I really wanted to do, which was always this image, because it's quite different to the others. But I really love this one, and I think the technique with the matte and the gloss does it justice, and I think I've achieved what I wanted to. Yeah, this is my favourite one because obviously you can see this wonderful doorway here, and I love the doorways at Budapest that have these beautiful curved skylight features above them. And I think this is the major attraction for me about these designs, because it's the secession design, which reminds me of back home in Glasgow, the Art Nouveau, and the Art Nouveau that you see everywhere back home. So that is the main feature for me, is this doorway. And then obviously the perspective. I created some perspective here by sanding this area around here and leaving the inside, basically the hallway, in gloss, so that it really gives some depth of field within the picture. And obviously the stairs end just here, and the pillars and the arch, which I've left sanded to create this contrast. And I also very much like the colours. This was actually, the reason it's green inside is because there was a movie being shot that day in the building, and the movie guys had left a green light in the hallway, which was in sharp contrast to the sun on the outside, the sunny day that we had. So I thought this was a very good moment to take a photograph of it, and at that point this gentleman walked into the frame, and I don't know who he is or what he was doing there, but he was obviously one of the crew on the film, so I got this spontaneous shot. I also took shots without the gentleman in the middle, but I much prefer this one because it appears as if he's actually floating because of the bright light behind him. And obviously the detail that you can see in these arches and in the cornicing here, these features are just stunning. I love these pieces of design in the building, and you can see the balustrade at the side of the stair in great detail there. So this is one of my very favourites because of this composition and the colours, and also the story behind it.